I really appreciate the kind of pinpointing the real adaptations that were made because of what you were learning in the process. And I think, taking something and just admitting that each of those lessons were identified and built as critically essential. Staff had identified them as critical building blocks, and coming up with the solution being, well, if the data is telling us staff are not able, given the setting, given whatever, they're spending more time to get through lessons because that's what young people need, to then come to the conclusion that the program has to be a 2-year intervention instead of 1 is a pretty bold adaptation. And I think without the data, there probably would have never been an opportunity to just acknowledge that that was a widespread issue. And in fact, we've changed now becoming a man to a 2-year intervention too for the same reason. So just really appreciate the receiving the information and making the adaptation. Dr. Paz? Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the preliminary initial promise findings. So findings showed significant improvements in all of our key outcome measures from pre to post in terms of mental health, social emotional skills, and academic outcomes. So we found statistically significant change from pre to post intervention on depression measures of social anxiety, reactive aggression, post-traumatic stress symptoms, self-esteem, as well as emotion regulation. Now, although WOW is not designed to be a clinical intervention to treat particular disorders, we also saw kids who started in the clinical range on these screening measures. Some of them were moving into the subclinical range, which was really exciting to see. So we saw 48% move from the clinical to subclinical range on social anxiety symptom measures. We saw 57% move from clinical to subclinical on depression measures, and 24% were moving to the subclinical range for post-traumatic stress as well. We also had findings for emotion regulation measures and self-esteem measures showing significant improvement. And I wanted to share some quotes from some of our participants in this study. One WOW participant said, "I don't go off on people a lot anymore. I think first before I react." A parent shared that she acts calmly now in tough situations. We also saw improvements in communication and self-advocacy. School staff were reporting students are much more communicative with their feelings, emotions, wants, and needs. And we were also hearing about improvements in relationships. So one WOW participant shared, "I started to let my family in and not shut them out when they try and talk to me." School staff were saying, "I have seen great strides in the ability to build positive relationships with others." If we move to the next slide, we'll see some of the academic outcomes. So across the year, we saw 90% of participants were failing no more than 1 course. 77% who had been suspended the previous year had fewer suspensions during the study year, and 95% of WOW seniors were graduating. So, yeah. Okay, so I do want to clarify, this again is not an outcomes evaluation. This is a necessary step towards building program readiness to undergo an effectiveness study. So interpretation of the findings do need to be interpreted with some caution. For example, we didn't have a control group, and there were changes being made to the curriculum as we were studying it. There was also potential bias. For example, WOW counselors were sometimes in the position of needing to fill out the teacher report forms because teachers were unavailable or unable to do that for one reason or another. Also, not all WOW participants were filling out the end of the year survey. So the data, though, was collected from such a large sample, utilizing mixed methods and multiple respondent groups, all of which builds to the credibility of these findings. So through this research, we were able to identify several important areas for potential improvements in implementation, feasibility, acceptability, and utility. But overall, the findings show that WOW is showing considerable promise and is worthy of further study.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate, too, this is the point of the engaging in a partnership this way. It's not just looking for what's working. It's looking for what's not working, too, so you have the opportunity to modify it. And I just really love how you crystallized the idea that there's so much promise. And that's, that was motivating to us, too, about why would it be worth subjecting this to another rigorous external evaluation is because look at, and you guys gave applause to the impact information, how promising it looks.